Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Krishna Krishna, Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Śrīla Prabhupada ki.
जय ओम विष्णुपाद परमहंस परिव्राजकाचार्य अष्टोत्तरशत श्री श्रीमद हिज डिवाइन ग्रेस अभय चरणारविंद भक्तिवेदांत स्वामी श्री प्रभुपाद की अनंत कोटि वैष्णव वृंद की ग्रंथराज श्रीमद्भागवतम की। ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। ग्रंथराज श्रीमद्भागवतम स्कंद 3 कैंटो 3 चैप्टर 13 टेक्स्ट 34। कदाचित् ध्यायतः स्रष्टुर् वेदासांश्चतुर्मुखात् कथं स्रक्ष्याम्यहं लोकान् समवेतान् यथा पुरा। कदाचित् ध्यायतः स्रष्टुर् वेदासांश्चतुर्मुखात् कथं स्रक्ष्याम्यहं लोकान् समवेतान् यथा पुरा। कदाचित् ध्यायतः स्रष्टुर् वेदासांश्चतुर्मुखात् कथं स्रक्ष्याम्यहं लोकान् समवेतान् यथा पुरा। You would like to recite? This can we move this side? Second is that third is that that's very thick. Anyone else? Okay. Vaishnavis. Once upon a time, dhyayataha, while contemplating, srashtuhu of Brahma, Vedaha, the Vedic literature, Haribol, Asan became manifested. Chaturmukhat, from the four mouths. Katham srakshamya, how shall I create? Aham, myself. Lokan, all these worlds. Samavetan, assembled. Yatha, as they were. Pura, in the past. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Once upon a time, when Brahma was thinking about how to create the worlds as in the past millennium, the four Vedas which contain all varieties of knowledge, became manifested from his four mouths. Purport: as a fire can consume anything and everything without being contaminated, so by the grace of the Lord, the fire of Brahma's greatness consumed his desire for the sinful act of sex with his daughter. The Vedas are the source of all knowledge, and they were first revealed to Brahma by the mercy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, while Brahma was thinking of recreating the material world. Brahma is powerful by dint of his devotional service unto the Lord, and the Lord is always ready to forgive his devotee if by chance he falls down from the noble path of devotional service. Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam 11.542 confirms this as follows: Swapadamulam bhajatah priyasya Tyaktvaanyabhavasya hari paresha Vikarmaya chotpatitam kathanchit Dhunoti sarvam hrudi sannivishtaha. Any person who is engaged 100% in the transcendental loving service of the Lord at his lotus feet is very dear to the personality of God Hari. And the Lord, being situated in the heart of the devotee, excuses all kinds of sins committed by chance. It was never expected that a great personality like Brahma would ever think of sex indulgence with his daughter. The example shown by Brahma only suggests that the power of material nature is so strong that it can act upon everyone, even Brahma. Brahma was saved by the mercy of the Lord with a little punishment. But by the grace of the Lord, he did not lose his prestige as the great Brahma. Om Jnanatimirandhasya Jnananjanishalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Śrīmate Bhakti Vedanta Swami iti namine. Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Desha Tarine Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. So I'm grateful to be here with all of you today. So my throat is a little bad, so I may cough a little bit in between the class, sorry about that. So today, this is a very sobering and inspiring passage from the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam. So it's sobering because it is following the incident where Brahmaji, soon after his birth, gets attracted towards his daughter, which is a very shocking incident. Among all the crimes in the world, incest is where a parent figure has physical interaction with somebody who is a child figure. That is considered the most horrible. So now, how could Brahma have something like that? And yet, what is described thereafter is that he has recovered from it, that he is now carrying on with his service, and the Lord has empowered him to have the Vedas manifest through him. So that means whatever happened is in his rear view mirror. It's happened and it's over. It's not being held against him. So we will discuss today this topic of how to understand when good people do bad things. Normally we ask the opposite question, that why do bad things happen to good people? But while that is a difficult question to answer, that question, like things happening to good people, that is called as natural evil. That means, why does the world act in a way that bad things happen to us? That somebody is a good person and suddenly they meet with an accident, they get cancer. So normally bad things that happen to good people, this is called as natural evil. That means, why is nature created in such a way that bad things happen to good people? But when good people do bad things, that is called as moral evil. Moral evil means, why are people made in such a way that they tend to do bad things? And we normally think that there are good people and there are bad people. So good people do good things and bad people do bad things. So, but when good people do bad things, that is extremely puzzling. So, now it is interesting that right at the beginning of creation, this is being talked about. And what is the reason for this? It is to understand and explain how when we act, there are many different factors based on which we act. So I'll talk of 4 factors using an acronym ICCT. So ICC is the Indian Cricket Board. It has a television channel, so ICT can be referred to that. But these are 4 factors. I is intention. C is conditioning. Second C is circumstance. And the last C is transcendence. So that means, why might somebody do something bad? Say for example, we consider somebody to be a very honest and very fair person, and that might be in our temple management, that might be in a politics, that might be in our workplace. We consider that person to be very honest, and then we come to know that they did something very dishonest. We know somebody to be a very calm and composed and reasonable person, and then they become extremely angry. The person becomes not just angry but becomes vicious. They make it a mission to hurt someone. So, okay, what kind of person is this? Did I misunderstand this person? Or is it that so now, do I misunderstand this person, or what exactly happened? It raises questions. So for us, also it happens sometimes. We all think of ourselves as a good person, but sometimes we end up doing bad things. So how do we understand what is the cause of a particular bad action that is done by someone? Now for that purpose, let's look at these 4 broad factors to try to understand what's happening. See, now basically the question comes up that when somebody has done a bad action, it can indicate 3 things. That actually this is their normal and it was concealed. That means this person was actually like that only, but they have concealed that for all this time. And now the real colors are coming out. Recently in India there's a big controversy over one big podcaster who spoke something very obscene. And he has invited many spiritual people. He seems to be interested in dharma and sattva and adhyatma. And then suddenly when he spoke something so outrageous, so people are outraged with him. And they're saying that all that he did till now was just a show. So that is a possibility. That the one is that the bad action it was just a mask, and that mask has now come off. Or we are trying to understand the bad action cause. This is one extreme, it's the normal, it's concealed. The other is that it is an exception. It is normally that person never behaves like this, and there were some, what they say, exigent circumstances. Exigent circumstances means that there were certain situations because of which that person did something like that. Normally they would not do it. So in our tradition also there is the idea of apad dharma, where somebody may have to do something which is not normally done because of circumstances. So now if we consider these two factors, one is extremist, that that person did something because of intention, then that would mean that that is a bad person. Say, what do I mean by intention? Say now, all these kids are sitting here, and now suppose somebody comes running from behind, and they want to come here quickly. So while running, they step their foot on somebody's body. Now normally, if we notice that we have stepped on somebody's foot or somebody's leg or somebody's body, we will say sorry, we will touch their body, we touch our head, we'll apologize. So we can say that's circumstantial, they're just running along and they didn't notice, maybe the crowd was so much, that was the only way to come ahead. But suppose, consider a situation where somebody is running and they see that okay, they have stepped on someone's foot, and they look up and they see who it is, and then they raise their foot and deliberately bang on that person's foot harder. Now, the first stepping on somebody's foot might be accidental, might be circumstantial, but the second is clearly intentional, isn't it? So, when something is intentional, then that means, that's a cruel act. That indicates cruelty. So what happens is that when somebody does something with knowing what they are doing, then that is far more serious a crime. Because they want to do it. They want to do it. They're knowingly doing it, they want to do it, they know what they're doing. So basically, let's look at it another way. So among these, the intentional is the most serious. If somebody is done intentionally, then it's a most serious problem. If it's circumstantial, then it is serious, but it is the least serious. Somebody say, who's normally a very polite person, we ask them something and they yell at us. And they just scream and go on a rant. We say, what happened? What's wrong with you? And then we come to know that they just got some bad news. Maybe they got the news that their parent has passed away. And they are very shocked by that. So what happens is, there we should not take that action very seriously. So now, here, Brahmaji has actually acted in a very seriously wrong way. The action itself is extremely wrong. But was it intentional? Was it due to conditioning? Was it due to circumstance? Now, what is the meaning of it being transcendental? That means the Lord has inspired someone to do something. So Prabhupada says sometimes that, say for example, Parikshit Maharaj apparently disrespecting Shringi's father, Shamik Rishi, was an arrangement of the Lord so that the Bhāgavatam could be spoken. So then we should just see that as an action which we should not be judging at all. There is something bigger going on. So let's put this another way. See, here there is the soul. Now the soul is surrounded by the mind. Mind body machine is there. The soul is surrounded by the mind, and now the mind, you could say the mind body machine is there. Let's put it mind on right now. Then we could put it as there is the body around it, and then the soul is situated in some circumstance. And above the circumstance is the Lord. Is, you can say, Krishna over here. So when somebody does an action, what we see is that person did the action. Now there are four possibilities that the action came from the person. The action came from the conditioning. The action came from the circumstance. And the action came by the arrangement of the Lord. So, that this is how, when somebody has done something, why exactly did they do it? It has come from the circumstance, means the circumstances were so difficult, were so troublesome that they did that action. The conditioning was so serious that they did that action. It was too strong. They knew what they were doing. They desired to do it and they did it. And they just became like a puppet or an instrument for the Lord, and the Lord made them do it. So depending on which of these four is the factor that is leading to a particular action, you have to consider that. So can you think of some action which is a bad action, but it is considered circumstantial, and the person is not considered to be responsible for that action? It's not a right thing to do, it's not a good thing to do, but it's considered circumstantial. So for example, when Sita speaks very harshly to Lakshman, that when Ram is abducted and then Maricha imitates the voice of Ram and calls, at that time Sita thinks this is Ram and she tells Lakshman to go. And when Lakshman refuses to go, she pushes him, and then finally she says that actually you're not going because you want Ram to die. You always had an evil eye on me, and because of that evil eye you are waiting for an opportunity that Ram would die and then you would have your way with me. But know that I will never be touched by anyone else. If Ram dies, I will die with him. I will never submit to your evil desire. Now Lakshman has never thought about such a thing also. And when he hears this, it's extremely painful for him. But while Lakshman goes away from there, does Lakshman hold Sita responsible for that? Now later on when Sita is abducted, does Lakshman say, she spoke so terribly to me, serves the right, this is what should have happened to her. It's a reaction to how she spoke to me. No, he doesn't say that. When Sita is rescued, at that time Lakshman and Sita meet. Lakshman will say, okay, I'm waiting for the apology and I'm going to apologize for what you spoke. No, it is due to circumstance. So even good people sometimes do bad things. But the principle here is, don't see intention in what is spoken in tension. When somebody is speaking something in tension, don't see intention in what is done or spoken in tension. So all of us may sometimes do bad things, and generally speaking, if the person is a good person, don't harp on that bad thing. Don't keep reminding the person, you spoke like that, you spoke like that, you spoke like that, you spoke like that. No, it is, don't see intention in what is spoken in tension. So something can be just because of circumstance, the pressure is so much and the person ends up doing something terrible. So I was staying at one devotee's house in America, and he had brought his father also to visit him, and he was trying to get his father to get an immigrant visa to locate in America. And I also noticed, and he also told me that, I can see that my father is always very cold with me. I'm trying to serve him, I'm trying to please him, but he's always very cold. So I was staying in their home for a few days, and then his father and we had an interest in English literature. So we started talking about that, and that's how we developed a rapport, talking about Shakespeare and Jane Austen and other such authors. And then finally, I asked him about how his relationship with his son is, and he told that when his son was just in 10th, in the 10th exam, just before the 10th, while he was in 10th, his mother, this person's wife had passed away suddenly because of a sudden disease. She had got cancer, and it was very advanced. So he said, after that, I tried to take care of my son. I did what I could. But then one day he was studying for his exam, and he had stayed awake late, and he told me that, please wake me up at this time. Now I woke him up, but I woke him once, twice, thrice. He didn't wake up. And when he didn't wake up, then I thought maybe he's very tired. Anyway, if he doesn't sleep enough, he will not be fresh for the exam. So I let him sleep. And finally he woke up 2.5 hours later, and he got so angry, and he screamed at me, and he said, it would have been better if instead of my mother you had died. He said that just broke my heart completely. And he says, from that time, he was the only person I was living for. He was my only son, and how could he have spoken like this? So then, at that time, I told his son, and he said, I don't even remember that. He says, I couldn't have spoken that. He told me that actually after my mother had passed away, I could see that my father was very sad. And I thought that if I do well in my exams, then I will be able to please him. And I can bring some happiness into his life. And that's why I was very anxious to do well in that exam. And maybe because of that anxiety, he went and fell at his father's feet and asked for forgiveness. And then they embraced each other. So what happened here was that something was spoken in tension. So, what son would want to have that kind of feeling towards one's father? But what is spoken in tension, don't see intention. So what happens is sometimes some actions are just done because of circumstance. Now you can say, even because of some circumstance, a person should never do something like this. And that is true. But still, none of us knows who is going through. And therefore, life is extremely difficult. And everybody is carrying different burdens. And under the pressure of the burdens that they are carrying, what they may do, it's difficult to understand. So therefore, in general, when a normally good person does a bad thing, give them the benefit of the doubt. So in one sense you could say that if you want to try to understand the bad action by a good person. So we could say, like every dial has a default and then it moves the other direction. So let our default be, the first default should be, look at the circumstance. Don't think this is the bad person. Look at the circumstance. So this is the first explanation to consider. So now if the circumstance doesn't explain it, now when might the circumstance not explain it? Say for example, if we consider, we'll continue this topic tomorrow also, but I'll mention a few points over here. If we consider, for example, Ravan abducted Sita, was that circumstantial? Why not? Because, he didn't just happen to be in that circumstance. He created that circumstance. Isn't it? When you say circumstance, that happened because of circumstance means that circumstance just came upon the person. But, so the other extreme is intentional. So Ravan doing something is an intention. So Sita to Lakshman is circumstance. But Ravan with Sita is intention. If somebody is creating a particular circumstance to do a particular thing, that means that person is definitely not, it cannot be blamed on circumstance. That means, say, if somebody happens to be in a particular room, somebody is a guest in our house, and that person happens to be in a room, and in that room our safe is there, and the safe where we keep our money or our treasury, it happens to be open, and that person just takes something, and later we catch him and he says, why did you do that? How could you do like that? I invited you as a guest at my home. And I say, actually I just got news that my daughter had fallen very sick and I was desperately needed some money for her operation, and I saw this was open. I thought I'll just take it, and before you notice it, I'll borrow someone, I'll make some arrangement and get it back. That's circumstance. But, if somebody deliberately became our friend, earned our trust, and then took from us the safety code of our safe, and then took the money from there, that is created the circumstance. So, these two are very different. Is it circumstantial or is it intentional? Now, so we could say this should be the last explanation. Look for this as the first explanation. Look at this as the last explanation. Don't assume that it is intentional. Now, when can we say that it is conditional? So conditional means what? It is due to conditioning. Conditioning means that somebody doesn't want to do it, they know it is wrong, but they can't stop themselves from doing it. So it's almost like at this point something is like a disease. Say somebody is coughing. Nobody wants to cough. Unless of course they want to hide something, they want to take some attention, something like that. Nobody wants to cough. Nobody coughs intentionally. So at this level of conditioning, we see it to be like a disease. And now so here the difference is that they don't want to do it, but still it is happening. Like somebody has a conditioning for anger. Whenever they are put in that little provocative circumstances, they just start yelling. Now, as soon as they realize what has happened, they apologize, they say, no, I'm sorry. But it's just the way they are. So some people may have certain conditionings. Now it's not just the circumstance. So this is a little complicated case, how to deal with this. But we will come to this. Now, of course, the last factor, which is relatively rare, is that it is. So after first, this should be the second. And now, this is third. Now that it is transcendental, that is something which is extremely rare. Normally, us as devotees, we should not claim that some action is transcendental. That yes, there are Vaishnavira Kriya Mudra Vigyehana Bhujai. That is true. But there are limits to that. And those limits, we cannot use it to justify any and everything. So a person cannot do terrible wrong things and say it is all Krishna's arrangement. So generally speaking, this is an exception. So if somebody is a very advanced devotee and they have done something which just seems to be completely off character, and even the circumstances doesn't seem to be a way that, okay, what are the circumstances over here? Then we can say there's something going on between this devotee and Krishna, and it's none of my business. I don't want to judge this devotee. However, we cannot take the transcendental explanation if that devotee's actions are affecting us directly or affecting someone we care for. Say, then we have to create a safe zone where that devotee does not harm other people. That's a relatively rare situation. So now in the case of Brahmaji, which was the factor over here among these four factors? Sorry? Transcendental. So was it the Lord's arrangement? Did the Lord want Brahmaji to do something like this? Well, maybe not. We don't know. But the point is that let's take the other approach. Was it intentional? No. If something is intentional, then there is a pattern. They keep doing it repeatedly. So Brahma's action, we are trying to understand. Was it intentional? No. Now was it due to conditioning? Well, let's put it this way. It's like he does not have that conditioning in one sense. But conditioning can also be referred to, Prabhupada generally explains in this purport also, that the illusory energy is so strong that sometimes even the best of people may end up doing bad things. So now we could call it as due to conditioning. Not so much the conditioning in terms of he having the conditioning, but rather he being in a particular place. So it's somewhere between, it could be this, it could be this, it could be this. We don't know. Acharyas can give different explanations at different contexts. So by circumstance, I mean what? Say that there's a doctor who has gone to treat people in a pandemic, and then the doctor gets infected over there. So the doctor is infected. We can't deny that. But do you want to blame the doctor for that? Of course not. Now normally what happens is, this is the last 2 points I'll conclude with. See, one problem with the infection idea, that the infection normally makes people passive. Now, if somebody becomes infectious, then they get an infection, they just lie on bed, they lose their energy. So this is the normal infection. But the infection of Maya, it often makes us hyperactive. So when somebody is infected by lust or anger or greed, then they actually do more than what they are normally doing. So this is an infection, you could say it's more like a mental health disease. Like some people are mentally disturbed because of some problem. Like there are some drugs, and you take those drugs, people just they get an extraordinary level of energy. And nowadays there are designer clothes. Now in America there are designer drugs being made. Designer drugs means what? That those drugs, like normal drugs, give intoxication, little bit intoxication, little bit high feeling. But those drugs, it just give you extremely high feeling. Very quickly with a very small dosage. But then it can be deadly if things go wrong. So the infection of Maya doesn't seem to be like an infection because the person is not inactive. The person is hyperactive. If we hear that somebody is very sick and we see that person is running around and talking loudly and doing many actions, this doesn't sound like sick person, isn't it? So that's why it's difficult to see the actions done by a person driven by lust, anger or greed as an infection. But still it is an infection. And the key point is that how long does the infection last? Are they aggravating the infection or are they trying to counter the infection? So that brings me to the last point. in the Bhagavad Gita 270, Krishna says that apuryamanamachala pratishtham samudramapah pravishanti yadvad tadvat kamayam pravishanti sarve sashantimapnoti nakamakami. The nakamakami means, it's a very interesting compound phrase, don't be a desirer of desire. Don't be a desirer of desire. So don't be. What does it mean, a desirer of desire? Na kama kami. So this desire refers to that which comes inside to us. So if this is the soul, this is the proposition. So desire can mean proposition. Proposition is outside the advertisement. Come on, buy this, eat this, watch this. That's kama, desire flowing in. And the second desirer is intention. So for us, the proposition may come, Prabhupada says, the desire may come, but the inclination to fulfill the desire is no longer there. That's what Prabhupada talks about in that purport, 270-71. So for all of us, how do we ensure that if the proposition comes, the intention does not come? That means that some thought pops up, some desire pops up inside us, some things we see. It could be circumstances, it could be conditioning, but the intention does not come up. That will happen when we have a much stronger intention for something else. If our intention to serve Krishna, our intention to practice bhakti is very strong, then even if the proposition comes, the intention does not come. So the prostitute came before Haridas Thakur and she offered herself to him. The proposition came, but there was no intention that came over there. Why? Because he had a very strong intention to serve Krishna. So here the fact that Brahmaji is now manifesting the Vedas through himself, through him, indicate that his intention to serve is so strong that the Lord has reciprocated his intention and he is continuing his service. So whatever was wrong is now in the rear view mirror. It's in the past and he has picked himself up and he has moved on in his life. By keeping our intention strong, we all also can, whatever has been done by someone, whatever has been done by us, we can put it aside and move ahead. Apichet suduracharo. Sudurachara is there, but bhajate imam ananya bhag. This intention is strong. Sadhureva samantavyaha samyag vyavasito hisaha. So I'll summarize what I discussed today. Mainly we discussed 3 points. Our topic was that when good people do bad things, how do we make sense of that? So we could discuss the example of Brahmaji over here, and there could be other examples also. So I said that what was the acronym? ICC. The I was intention. That means they did this because they wanted to do it. Now this indicates that this is the worst kind of situation. C is conditioning. They didn't want to do it, but their conditioning impelled them to do it. Next is circumstance. That means it is largely external. And T is transcendence. That is the Lord made an arrangement for them to do it. So it's like when somebody does something as the soul, so where is that particular action coming from? So now they are in a particular circumstance and above them is the Lord. So is the action, when they are doing a particular action, the origin could be, it is their intention, it is the conditioning, it is the circumstance, or it is some divine arrangement. So we need to see which one it is. So now if it is circumstantial, then we need it is the least damaging. So overall we try to start with, when we are trying to look at a circumstance, we try to look for this as the first explanation, second and then third. give people the benefit of the doubt. And then, as far as dealing with such situations is concerned, I talked about first is that we overlook, that we give the benefit of the doubt to the person, and then lastly, if somebody is doing something like that, the way to overcome that is that nakama kami. So don't jump to conclusions. Rather, you could put it like, give the benefit of the doubt. So start with the least negative explanation, give benefit of the doubt, and then cultivate a stronger intention. And if you do this, then whatever bad was done, why did that person do it? We don't know. But if there is higher intention being cultivated, then nakama kami, that person will go beyond that particular chapter in their life. Cultivate or strengthen a higher intention. So give benefit of the doubt is for others. When somebody has done like that, cultivate higher intention is for us if we have done something like that. Now others can also apply it, but in this way we can respond in an appropriate way and move ahead in our lives. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna. Is there any question or comment? So, yeah. C means the person is doing bad things repeatedly. Yeah, so then it is either intention or it is conditioning. So tomorrow morning I'll talk more about the conditioning part and we'll discuss it more elaborately. So certainly at that particular time, if a person is doing something repeatedly wrong, then some boundaries have to be created. So that, say, some devotees, some devotee for example, they have excessive attraction for Krishna in the form of prasad. And if that person is made in charge of Mahaprasad, and then all the Mahaprasad every day disappears. Now, one day it disappearing is understandable, maybe, but every day is disappearing and something is off over there. Then does that make, if a devotee is taking all the prasad which is supposed to be distributed to other guests, is that a bad thing? It is definitely not a good thing. Does that make that person a bad devotee? Maybe not a bad devotee, but maybe that person should not be Mahaprasadam in charge then. If somebody has anger issues, they just get angry very quickly. Now that does not necessarily make that person a bad person. But if somebody has a short temper, maybe they should not be put in charge of devotee care. Isn't it? So sometimes we have to change the circumstances to protect the person. Okay. So sometimes if it's due to conditioning, you change the circumstances, then the person doesn't get the opportunity to do it, gradually they overcome the conditioning. But sometimes you change the circumstances for that person, but they deliberately try to go into the previous circumstances. Then we can say it is much more because of intention. So tomorrow I'll discuss the Ajamil pastime and then we'll see where his particular action falls in this particular prison. We'll discuss this more a little bit. Yes, Prabhu.
Prabhuji, so you have explained the example of Haridas Thakur and the prostitute, like he has higher intention to serve Krishna. When proposition came, so he didn't act upon it. So my question is that we see that proposition comes from inner side, from inner self only. So how do we understand that body, like proposition coming from inner side only, but also should be intention also should be is from inside only, right?
See, that is where some kind of commitment is very helpful. So, say if the proposition comes that, I want to eat all this food, but if I have invited some guests to my home and I am going to offer food to them, then what happens is that culture is there, that sense of responsibility is there, that commitment is there. So one of the best ways to prevent the proposition from causing a disruption of our life is to have commitments. Like suppose we have a whole weekend and nothing to do. Then I'll read a little book, I'll hear some class, maybe I'll sleep a little bit. And we'll end up sleeping for a lot of time. So what happens is the proposition is coming, but if there is no commitment, which influences commitment, helps us to not take the propositions of the mind too seriously. If there is no commitment, then there is no reason to say no to the mind. It's like, say, some friend invites us to go somewhere. We don't want to go there, but it's difficult to say no to someone. Now, if at that time we already had a meeting planned with somebody else, you can say, no, actually I have to go to this person, that's why I can't come. It's easier. So that's why if we have something to say yes to already locked in, so then it's easier to say no to the propositions of the mind. Yes, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. So, regarding conditioning, so when we see that someone is acting out of conditioning, as we had seen in the past, a repeated pattern of his behavior or his speech, which might be disturbing to the other devotee. So, how do we see that devotee, and what should be our
I'll talk
thought
about
process?
conditioning tomorrow elaborately, because it's a whole subject. But briefly, I said that that devotee needs to be given a space where they can continue their service, but at the same time, it should not be causing disruption to others. So how to do that? That is the resourcefulness of those in charge. Okay. Thank you very much. Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam ki, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Gaur Bhakta Vrinda ki jai, Jai Gaur Premanande.